All right, since I talked about a couple prospects that I would not trade at the deadline, let's talk about some that I do not expect to be here post deadline. These are the guys I think are most likely to be dealt in a move that would acquire some major league talent, albeit an outfielder or relief help. We all know what the Phillies are looking for, but these are the guys that I think will be on the move, and they're most likely to be dealt by the Phillies. So if you've gotten attached to them, I want it, and I'll explain why. And the first one, and we're just going in order of Major League Baseball's top 30 prospects here, but the first one is number 5. He is now back in the top 100. I think he is number, 87, 88. I probably should know this, so hit thumbs down for that. But it is Mick Abel. I do not expect Mick Abel to be here on August 1st. Mick Abel last season was one of the worst pitchers in the entire International League. The Phillies stuck with him the entire season in the International League. They never moved him to the bullpen. His ERA was well over 6. I mean, I think it was like 6.66. All right, it wasn't that. I know that because that would pop out, 666. But it was really, really bad. And something clicked this year. Like, he did a complete 180, to his credit. He forced the Phillies to call him up when they needed an arm when Aaron Nola went down. And Mick Abel, we all remember the debut, right? 6 innings, 9 Ks, outduels Paul Skeens, looks incredible. And then after that, it was up and down, and it was capped off by a really, really rough outing against San Diego Padres where he couldn't make it out of the second inning. And his big bugaboo in his entire career has been walks, and it reared its ugly head in that game. He was sent back down to AAA, and mainly because the Phillies don't really need a fifth starter until after the All-Star break. So it's kind of up and down who will be called back up. Will it be Mick Abel? Will it be Andrew Painter? I would call back up Mick Abel if they need somebody. But at the end of the day, I think July 31st, he will be dealt. Last year, I thought he'd be dealt. Full transparency. I thought he would be dealt in a package that was like Mick Abel and a couple of other guys. But Mick Abel wouldn't be the main piece of the deal. Mick Abel would kind of be a throwing guy when you looked at like a reclamation project because of the fact that he was having such a bad season at AAA. And baseball is such a mental game where you wondered last season, because he's having such a rough year, has he hit a wall? Is this what's likely to come? Is it a deer in the headlights thing? Confidence? Like what? But when you look at what he's done this season in AAA, he went from being one of the worst pitchers to one of the best pitchers in the International League. I mean, he is crushing it right now for the Iron Pigs. Then he comes up and he has that start against Paul Skeens, and now you're starting to think, okay, maybe instead of being kind of a reclamation project in a package that would, involve a proven talent, maybe now Mick Abel is the guy. Maybe he is the main piece that would acquire that outfielder. Maybe he's the main piece that would acquire that arm that you desperately need out of the bullpen, because teams are going to look at him and they're going to be very, very enticed by what they saw. He's still 24 years old. He's still very young. But the main reason why I think Mick Abel will not be here is there is no room for him. There's none. When you look past this year, where does Mick Abel fit? Like, look at it. Zach Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, Aaron Nola, they're all locked up to long-term deals. Jesus Luzardo is under team control. Taijuan Walker has another year left on his deal, and everybody's expecting Andrew Painter to grab that fifth starter spot if need be. Now, I already said 5. That's Andrew Painter. That's 6 starters. So this is assuming that Taijuan Walker would go back to the bullpen and Andrew Painter would slide in the fifth starter spot. But if Andrew Painter fails to grab it, the Phillies have no problem throwing Taijuan Walker back in the fifth starter spot to begin the year. Because if it's really, really bad, and Andrew Painter never, ever throughout the season turns it on and, he struggles again because he's not having a great year in AAA. He's rusty. He hasn't pitched in 2 years. But they'll just address it at the deadline. They'll just grab a fifth starter if they need be. They'll grab a Michael Lorenzen. So when you look at the rotation moving forward, they don't have room for him. So what do? I mean, personally, I would love it if they moved on from Aaron Nola. I'd love it if they traded and got rid of that contract and they made a wrong right by locking up Ranger Suarez. Ranger Suarez, we're all assuming the Phillies let him walk for whatever reason, even though he's incredible. I mean, the guy's got, a 1.99 ERA this season, and all that dude's done is be pretty clutch for the Phils. But this is all assuming the next season the Phillies let Ranger Suarez walk, and even if they let him walk, they still have 5 to 6 starters who are basically penciled in, 4 of them penned in to your rotation. So Mick Abel doesn't even fit. He doesn't have a spot. And it's not like you want to trade Mick Abel necessarily. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would like to, develop him and see what he can be. But the reality is, if he projects to be a 4 or 5 and he can get you a stud outfielder where you no longer have to look at Max Kepler, you no longer have to see Brandon Marsh out there, okay. I think Mick Abel is the number one guy, the number one out of everybody in the organization to not be here August 1st. I would be blown away if Mick Abel is still here. I think Mick Abel went from being a reclamation project in a package that would probably include 4 prospects to grab a guy, or maybe 3 or 4, to now it might be 1v1. Mick Abel gets you somebody, and you don't have to give up anything else. And that's the luxury of what the Phillies have done with their system, with taking it from being one of the worst to the best, is you now have a plethora. You have this treasure trove of riches, and you can dish it out. And for those that will be attached to prospects, and Lord only knows I'm one of those people that falls in love with prospects, I will remind everybody out there that the greatest run of the Phillies organization was, 08 to 2011 in that 4-year stretch. And they traded off pretty much every prospect they had, and not many panned out. It's like Travis d'Arnaud panned out, and he was dealt for Roy Halladay. Carlos Carrasco, you could point to and say, okay, he panned out, but I'll remind you he was designated for assignment at one point by the Indians, and that they had given up on him. They really only called him back up because they were desperate, and then he became Carlos Carrasco. There's one more in there that I'm forgetting that was okay, he was okay. But for the most part, they dealt a ton of prospects, and none of them really panned out. So, but he's the one guy that I think absolutely will not be here. The next prospect that I'll talk about is the number 11 ranked prospect in the organization, Gabriel Rona Jr. He's an outfielder right now for the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. He's a former 3rd-round pick, and I think that he is also a lock to get dealt. I think he's a guy that will be really enticing to teams for one reason. When you look at Gabriel Rona Jr., he's only hitting .218, and he's a 3rd-round pick. He plays outfield. Okay, so on the surface, you just look at average. You look at age, because I think he's 24. You look at where he's at. He's struggling at the plate in AAA. So what would entice teams by that? It's the .349 on-base percentage. The dude gets on base. He might struggle to get a hit, but his plate discipline is going to entice teams. Because plate discipline is something it's really, really tough to teach. Tough to learn, he's got that. And there'll be some team out there that goes, if we can work with him on his swing and get him more comfortable at the plate, and he raises his average from 218 to, let's say, 240, 245, his on-base percentage is going to be close to 400. It's going to be in the 380s. So if we can do that, then we possibly have a 3rd outfielder that we can plug into a major league lineup. But the big reason why I think Gabriel Rona Jr. will be dealt is because the organization just has better outfield prospects. When you look at next season, I'm expecting Justin Crawford to grab either center or left. I think a lot of people are. Justin Crawford really doesn't have much to prove anymore at AAA. He's dominated International League pitching. He's better than Gabriel Rona Jr. Dante Nori, the former 1st-round pick last year, I'm sure the organization views him as better than Gabriel Rona Jr. Gabriel Rona had a really, really good spring training. And because of that, he was put to AAA, much like Justin Crawford. It was like, hey, we're not going to put you back at AA. We'll put you at AAA. And it's been mixed because of the average versus the on-base percentage. But there will be a team out there that looks at him and goes, man, I bet you we can fix him. Much like the Phillies looked at Brandon Marsh and said the same thing. When the Phillies traded for Brandon Marsh, it was, we see something in his swing. We think we can fix him. They couldn't. He's not very good. But there will be some team that goes, yeah, okay, we have an expiring contract for a reliever who's having a really, really good year. Yeah, okay, we'll take Gabriel Rona Jr. and we'll work with him, and hopefully we get that batting average up, and all of a sudden, he becomes the 8th or 9th guy in your lineup, and we at least got a starter out of him. So Gabriel Rona Jr., don't expect him to be here. Number 11 ranked prospect in the system. Yeah, I think he's probably out. The next guy we'll talk about is the ace of the Reading Fightin' Phils, the number 12 ranked prospect in the system, Gene Cabrera. Take everything I said for the reasons of why Mick Abel will get traded, and Gene Cabrera's the same reason. I mean, there's a log jam of pitchers. They don't really need him. He's having a really, really good year in Reading. He's improved every single month. I think in April his ERA was around 4, and in May it was like 3.7, and then in June he had his best month. And I actually wrote a story for all PHLY about the top 5 prospects in the month of June, and he was one of them because he had a really, really good month. And he did so, mind you, at First Energy Stadium in Reading, which is a bandbox. It's a hitter-friendly park. But when you look at the organization, they don't need him. And again, it's the luxury of having that much pitching and that much pitching locked up where you can deal a Gene Cabrera and not even think twice about it. Okay, fine. Yeah, all right. Here, we'll take your closer. You get Gene Cabrera. You get a starter, and we'll take your reliever that might have a year left on his contract, or he's an all-star this year, whatever. But Gene Cabrera, pretty much the same reason why I don't think McAble here is Gene Cabrera. The only difference is McAble's a AAA with some Major League Baseball experience, so I think he gets you a better prospect or a better player. Gene Cabrera, I'm looking at probably he's going to get you a bullpen arm, but a very good bullpen arm. But I think teams could do worse than Gene Cabrera because I think Gene Cabrera is a Major League pitcher eventually. He's just in a situation where the organization doesn't really have a spot for him. They're better prospects. And their organization's locked up. So we'll just move on from those guys, and we will look at another guy who is currently on the Major League roster, and that's Otto Kemp. And Otto Kemp has been a great story. Like, undrafted free agent, signs with the organization, and while McAble has been arguably the best pitcher in the International League, you can make a case that Otto Kemp was the best hitter in the International League. He forced his way to the majors. He forced his way for the organization to go like, we got to put this guy on the roster. And you love that. Like, you love when players are playing so well that they don't get called up because of hype or name. And let's be real, if Andrew Painter was called up right now, it'd be because of the hype and all of that. But when Otto Kemp was called up, it was completely earned. I've said it before. I think Otto Kemp is a big reason why the Phillies let go of Cody Clemens. They basically played the same role. They were a utility guy, a super utility guy that could play all around. But I think the organization looked at it like, well, Cody Clemens is out of options. If we put him at AAA, he's going to get claimed. So if we designate him for assignment, he's going to get claimed. We might as well just trade him because we got this Otto Kemp guy. He's cheaper. He's younger. And he's performed pretty well. But where do you play him? Where does he go? Because when you look at Otto Kemp, he played second base, shortstop, and third base in AAA. And it was mainly just second and short. And you look at the Major League roster, and like that's set. Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, they're not going anywhere. Third base, I mean, Alec Boehm's been in trade conversations last offseason, but you could do worse than Alec Boehm. Alec Boehm's a pretty good baseball player. Comes up clutch in terms of like RBI situations. Like, I don't want to move on from Alec Boehm. And he's improved on his defense. So I think if you moved Alec Boehm for Otto Kemp, I think that's a downgrade. They've tried him at first base, but first base is locked up. You've got some Bryce guy there. And then they've tried him in the outfield. So they're kind of trying to move him around and find a spot for him and maybe make him that Whit Merrifield type when Whit Merrifield was with the Royals and the Blue Jays and he was kind of that super utility guy. Phillies tried to do that, obviously, with Scott Kingery. It didn't work out. I don't think they try to do that very long with Otto Kemp because I think a team will look at Otto Kemp and go, we see him as our Major League second baseman. We see him as our Major League shortstop. And I think Otto Kemp could get you a lot because, while the story's great, the talent is clearly there. The dude had a great season last year, had a great Arizona Fall League, had a monster season in AAA this year, and is not looked out of place in the Major League level. I think Alec Boehm can get you a decent chunk at the trade deadline. Or Otto Kemp, Alec Boehm, jeez. Hit thumbs down for that. I don't know ball. But I think Otto Kemp could absolutely get you a decent haul at the trade deadline. I think some team will look at him and go, yeah, we could do a hell of a lot worse than a guy like Otto Kemp. I mean, when the Phillies traded for Joe Blanton, they traded their number 2 prospect in Adrian Cardenas because it was the same thing. He played second and short. They weren't moving him to third base. Well, second and short was occupied by some Jimmy guy and the Chase fella. Like, there's no room for Otto Kemp. So unless you're going to keep him here to be a super utility guy, and maybe they do that. Hey, like he's not a lock to get traded. Maybe they look at him as the replacement for Edmundo Sosa, whose contract is up next season, and it's going to be interesting to see how much money he gets. Does Edmundo Sosa get a starting role somewhere? Does he get offered a starting role? And if so, then you keep Otto Kemp. If you think that the future is that Edmundo Sosa is not on your team, yeah, maybe you keep Otto Kemp, and Otto Kemp can move all over the diamond and spell some guys from here and there, so the workload isn't as much. Maybe. But I do think the Phillies will get calls on Otto Kemp. I think when the Phillies make calls at the deadline, teams are going to go, okay, yeah, we'll give you this. Give us Otto Kemp. So those are the four that I think will get the most traction at the deadline, with some, I think, locks to get traded. And I mentioned Mick Abel being, I think, the biggest lock. Another guy that I think could possibly get dealt is Seth Johnson, former second-round pick, former top 100 prospect. Came up last year. He was involved in the Gregory Soto trade from the Orioles, so he's with the second organization at this point. Came up last year in a spot start, didn't pitch well. Phillies moved him to relief. I think there's a possibility that some team will want him. They'll say, no, we don't really see him as a reliever. We still think we can get something out of him as a starter. The stuff is still there. The projection is still there. He just hasn't quite put it together at the AAA level. He's had a rough go of it this year. I think he could be on the move. Michael Mercado, same thing. He's had a cup of coffee in the major leagues. Hasn't really latched on. There might be some team that goes, we like his size. We like his makeup. We'll give him a shot at being a starter in our organization, whereas the Phillies have moved him to the bullpen. So those are the guys I think are the most likely to be dealt at the deadline. Hopefully you didn't get attached to them too much, and we will rehash this. We'll look back on it after the deadline, and we'll either laugh at how stupid I am, or I'm not wanting to do a victory lap. So I'm not going to, if I was right on these, I'll just do a quick mention. I'm not going to sit there and go like, oh, hey, look at me. Yeah, those people kind of suck. But now's the part of the video where you guys hit buttons. Subscribe's important. I need subscribers, folks. I don't like twerking on the pole for free. You can hit thumbs down or hit thumbs up. That's up to you. But subscribe, please. And go Phillies.